Hey, fam.
What's up?
We are here for the HR40 pre-huddle. How you guys feeling about the hearing tomorrow?
Excited.
All right. Well, we will definitely get into that
Your
tonight.
boy is not impressed.
We shall see. So that's starting at 7 a.m. So we need to set our alarms and be up early listening.
early, early.
All right, Emoya. Well, if you can give us a few housekeeping updates.
All right, let's do it. So if anybody's interested, hit us up for show intros. Here I go. Intros, outros, voiceovers, script copy, 15 and 30-second promos. Be a 2 business day turnaround. Hit us up at 80CA Media Group at gmail.com.
All right.
Hit us up.
So, what is going on in California this week? Um, let's take a look
Oof, a lot.
at our unemployment numbers. Starting, California unemployment increased to 0.9% since November 2020. Employers lost 52.2 non-farm payroll jobs, first increase in month-over-month unemployment since April 2020. Important note, the employment data for the month of December 2020 is taken from the survey week, including December 12th. Data for that month of January is scheduled for release on March 12th, 2021. California's unemployment rate rose 0.9% to 9.0% in December, as the state employers lost 52.2 thousand jobs. According to the data released today by the California Employment Development Department from 2 surveys, this comes after the state saw a job gain in November, 5,200 jobs, despite December's losses. California has regained more than 44% of the, what is that?
It's like,
What
what?
is that?
Million?
Well, non-farm jobs that
Yeah.
were lost due to COVID-19 pandemic in March and April. So,
Yeah.
according to this chart, things aren't looking great in California on the job front.
Yeah, there's one thing to keep in mind here too, and that is that if you remember back in December in California, the new stay-at-home orders actually started again, right? So there was a forced unemployment, if you will, where lots of different businesses, different companies, different industries had to actually like either stop hiring or stop their operations, one or both of those. So these numbers are going to be influenced, skewed by the fact that December was a stay-at-home order month. There should be a bounce in either the opposite direction or maybe even a leveling out of unemployment. All other things being the same in the month of January and in the month of February, most likely because we don't have these same stay-at-home orders still in effect. A lot of the stay-at-home orders have been lifted, so keep that in mind when you're thinking about these job numbers, right? There were businesses that could not hire, that did not do any business in the month of December because the government said so, because the state said so, and that was primarily, if you are listening to the state, primarily to keep people safe from spreading COVID-19 coronavirus.
Okay, so that's one consideration. Do you have an idea of how many Black businesses in particular shuttered during this year of COVID?
Oh wow, great question. So not in terms of a month by month. In the year though, since February of 2020, let's say, we can estimate that somewhere between 25 and 40% of all Black-owned businesses had either shuttered completely forever or shuttered or stop doing business at least temporarily. So if you knew how many Black businesses there were prior to COVID-19, some 2.5 million. If we're talking 25 to 40%, we're talking in the hundreds of thousands of businesses Black owned that stop doing business either permanently or temporarily in the year since February. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of Black-owned businesses and at least hundreds, thousands here in the state of California.
So, Chris, what what does that mean in terms of jobs and employment for Black people? That
Yeah,
well,
great question. It means bad things. To be honest with you, Black folks typically hire Black folks more than other businesses. So Black folks usually hire Black folks more often than non-Black folks. So and Black folks are usually Black folks' best customers too. So when you have Black businesses going out of business, you have a lot of Black jobs, going away, and that's what we've seen. In addition to losing businesses, we've also lost jobs.
wow.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see some improvement. I know a lot of people are
Yeah,
getting their online businesses together, so hopefully that will, make a dent in this dire outlook. Speaking of dire outlooks, what's going on with COVID this week?
wow. Yeah, so I just want to jump in real quick. I know Kim, you're probably going to go over the exact numbers. Please do. But here is where we actually have some better news and some better news for once on the COVID-19 coronavirus story. Right, we've been covering this really since our first shows back, several months ago, back in 2020, and we really haven't had a lot of good news to report pretty much ever, but we have some good news actually. You can see on your screen actually what is a graph on the left side there of the number of new cases, I believe, for COVID-19. And you can see that all the way to the right of that one graph on the left, that line is coming down and way down actually. It's actually down towards where it's almost lowest ever, or at least lowest since we started measuring this back in February or March of 2020. So the number of new daily cases for COVID-19 is actually going down. This is a really good uh, thing to be able to say. That's nationwide. Same thing here in California. Though, if you look at the, let's say, 7-day weekly new case averages, those cases are coming way down and are way down from where they were last month. Right now, we're at about 8,000 per day new cases nationwide, which is again near a 1-year low. COVID-19 deaths, however, they seem to be on a steady and historic rise in December and January in December of 2020 and January of this year. But more good news, they seem to be either leveling off or actually starting to come down from their historic highs. So we have some good news to report on the COVID-19 front. We haven't spoken much about the vaccine here today yet, but if you look at the vaccine, more vaccine is coming online every single day. I believe we're at about a million people plus per day being vaccinated. So there is some good news to report on the COVID-19 front for once.
Okay, so cases overview in California, we're looking at a total of about 3.5 million. Then we have deaths close to 50,000, 47,000. United States, 27 million cases, zero point 0.7 million cases, 486,000 deaths. And worldwide, we're looking at 109 million cases, 61.4 recovered, and you know 2.4 million deaths. But you said something, Chris, that interests me.
Yeah.
You said that there were more deaths in December and January. Isn't that about the time when they started heavily rolling out the vaccine?
No. So what's interesting about COVID-19 information is that not all of the information is about the same period in time. So, for example, usually COVID-19 deaths uh, do what they call lag the new cases, meaning that you get the new deaths going up after sometimes 2 and 3 weeks after you see the new cases going up, because the way the virus works, you catch it, it takes you a couple of weeks to get really sick, and then if you are going to unfortunately lose your life from it, it takes a little bit of a while for that to happen. A couple of weeks. It's not instantaneous. So the data we're actually looking at for deaths specifically, as opposed to new cases, actually almost goes in the opposite direction when you look at them at the same time. So you'll very often see new cases coming down while deaths are going up, and that's just because of the way that the virus actually acts on the human body, and how long it takes for the virus to unfortunately kill you if it's going to kill you, and what the difference in the time frame is when you're reporting those numbers. So there's no correlation between, and there's no relationship that we know of between the vaccine, more vaccine coming online, and the number of deaths going up. That's actually the opposite of what you would expect, and that's actually what we actually see in the real world. So the more vaccine we've seen, to be honest with you, the less death we've seen, but it's still a little bit early in the vaccine rollout to talk specific numbers.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to add on that, just real quick, Kim. I also heard that Johnson and Johnson is about to get in the game soon. So I know Moderna and Pfizer has been in the game for a minute, but I think
Right.
Johnson is supposed to be coming in pretty soon too.
Yeah, and what's special about the Johnson vaccine you're speaking of is the vaccines that we have out right now take 2 doses. So you're supposed to get one dose, whenever you can get it, and then I think about 3 weeks later, or so, you're supposed to get a second dose. That's how it is right now with the vaccines that we have out right now. The Johnson and Johnson vaccine is different because it only takes one dose to have its full maximum effect. So that's why there's a lot of anticipation. A lot of people are really looking forward to the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. Let's talk really quickly about Black folks and our position toward the vaccine. Once more, we've talked about this several times here on the show. Some recent research shows that of all of the different people vaccinated so far across the country, Black folks are about 5% of all of the total vaccination so far. So we're not we're at least not getting as vaccinated as our percentage of the population, and you're going to see most likely a lot of, or at least a lot more, health officials start to target Black folks even more to make sure that we're getting vaccinated. But right now, at least from some of the last data that we saw coming out of the government, Black folks are about 5% of all the total number of people who've been vaccinated so far.
All right.
Okay. Even though majority of Black people are frontline workers, they're still not getting vaccinated at a higher level.
Yeah, good point. So the majority of there are definitely a lot of Black folks who are frontline workers, but frontline workers come in different forms, right? So, for example, I consider grocery store workers and restaurant workers frontline workers, right? But if you look at the plans for vaccinating people, specifically, let's say here in California, right? What's our vaccination plan? It has a priority list of different kinds of frontline workers, and I believe they started with the medical folks, right? Doctors, nurses, people who are working directly with those COVID-19 patients, right? And then there's a priority for I believe it's older folks, right? Older folks, particularly in nursing homes, right? So there's a priority list, and I would say it's ironic, but it's not ironic. It seems to be a feature of the system that we are under, that when there's something potentially good, we don't get it as much as we should, and when there's something potentially bad, we get more of it, right? So keep that in mind too. That's also at play here too. But just because Black folks, you see us out there, out there on the front lines, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be front in line to get the vaccine.
Okay. So
Front of line.
the good news is the cases are going down, which
Yes.
many people predicted would happen after the election. So speaking of the election, Trump just got acquitted. Uh, Trump acquitted
Yeah.
in second impeachment trial. The
Yep.
U.S.
Yep.
Senate voted Saturday to acquit former President Donald Trump on an impeachment charge of incitement of insurrection, bringing Trump's second impeachment trial to a close. The vote came after a 5-day proceeding in which arguments focused on whether Trump incited the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and whether it's constitutional to conduct an impeachment trial of a former president who's now a private citizen. That's what I wanted to know. The acquittal, largely along party lines, was expected, though the Senate is split 50-50 with Vice President Kamala Harris as potential tiebreaker. Vote as president of the Senate. An impeachment trial requires a 2/3 supermajority for a conviction, meaning 17 Republican senators would have had to break with Trump. In the end, the vote was 57-43 to convict, with all 48 Democrats, 2 independents, and 7 Republicans finding Trump guilty. The Republicans who voted alongside Democratic senators to convict Trump were Senator Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Ben Sasse, Pat Toomey, Bill Cassidy, and Richard Burr. It was the most bipartisan conviction we've ever seen in the Senate for a presidential impeachment, Jamie Raskin, lead impeachment trial manager, said Saturday afternoon. So we were trying to figure out how much this impeachment cost the American public. I did a little bit of research myself, and it just basically said that the members that were working on this, they were getting paid their regular day rate anyway, so it really doesn't matter because they would have gotten paid whatever they were working on. And they make about, 7,000 plus a day. So,
Wow.
do the math and do the math and that's what it costs us. This information is telling us, it turns out it is entirely clear. It isn't entirely clear, and estimates vary widely. Roll call estimates: first impeachment trial in January 2020 cost $1.83 million. Another estimate from the Heritage Foundation put the price tag at $3.6 million, including the salaries of not only lawmakers but 106 congressional staffers and 6 lawyers. So, what is costing money is heightened security around the Capitol in light of the January 6th attack, has reportedly cost $519 million.
Wow. $500 million for more security. One thing to think about too is there's a couple ways to think about the costs question, and I want to go back to your constitutional question too, Kim, because I think that's a good one. That was definitely tested during the trials. And by the way, Mr. Raskin was incorrect with respect to Mr. Raskin. It was not a bipartisan conviction vote. They did not vote to convict. They voted to acquit. So, so it was a bipartisan acquittal vote. But to the cost, so yeah, these folks may have been getting, whatever they were going to get, $7,000 a day, which is
Mhm.
wow. I talk about raise the minimum wage, right? These are the same people who are not wanting to put the raise the minimum wage in the American Rescue Plan, right? And making $7,000 a day, okay, right? Not even getting their hands dirty, Um, so
Yeah, but they
yeah,
did say that they only work a certain amount of days a year, so
yeah, yeah,
they got to make
yeah.
that $7,000 a day stretch, you know.
Yes, right. That's right. Yes, the less days I work, the more. Yeah, is I guess that's how it is when you got it like that. So, cost, you want to think about it in terms of opportunity cost too. So, what are you not doing that you could be doing? With the time that you're spending doing an impeachment. What's the opportunity lost that you're giving up while you're doing this other thing, right? And that's what I think we have to think in terms of with respect to this impeachment. Donald Trump, as you mentioned, is twice impeached, twice acquitted. So he's now broken another history book record. He's the first president to be impeached twice, first president to be acquitted twice. And you're right, 7 Republicans voted to impeach the president. The vote was 57-43, 57. So one thing to note is that more than half, let's just keep it real. Let's look at the numbers. More than half of the Senate said that Donald Trump was guilty of the crime of inciting the riot on June 6th, which is that's a very serious crime and should be removed from office if he was guilty. And they said he was guilty, 57 of them. But you need 2/3 of the majority of the Senate, meaning 67 votes to convict any president. Kind of feels like you need 67 votes to really do anything in Congress now. To be honest with you, you need at least 2/3 to really do anything, or at least close to that. But especially for impeachment trials, which this was, you need 2/3 of the sitting members of the Senate to say yes. And this did not happen this week. And Donald Trump, who is still banned from social media, by the way, right? We can't really hear what he's saying, but he's talking, right? You can just hear him talking in your own head, kind of, right? And from what we understand from statements he made to some folks around him, he was pleased with the outcome of the trial, called it the end of a witch hunt, right? Called the charges false. He repeated his claim that the election was stolen, so he's not going anywhere with that claim. He's not backing down from that claim. He's still on the claim that the election was stolen from him. He said the MAGA movement was just getting started and that he will be back in some form very, very soon. The interesting thing about another interesting thing about the vote, in addition to the constitutionality question, which is where I want to sort of pivot to now, is the way Mitch McConnell voted, right? The Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. He actually voted to acquit Trump. So he voted to find Trump not guilty, but then went on the Senate floor and gave a speech saying that Trump was guilty, but that he couldn't find him guilty by voting for him to be guilty because it's not constitutional for the Senate to convict somebody who's no longer in office, right? And this was the first time I think we had to test this question. I don't think we've had this question before as a country. One question it begs and it really raises is if it's the case that ex-presidents can't be convicted and then removed from office, after a certain period of time in their presidency, then that leaves some part of the presidency where they can do things that they have no at least impeachment and then conviction type of consequences. There may be other consequences. Mitch McConnell talked about how Trump could still be in trouble with the law, and the courts, but that ultimately it was not a good idea to to convict him in the Senate. So this was a really important question and really a first of its kind. Trump responded to McConnell's speech, really, calling McConnell a bad leader, saying he was "quote unquote" an unsmiling person, and promised to support Republican primary candidates in the midterms in 2022. So there's a fight, at least on the surface. It looks like that's brewing, or has been brewing, between now ex-president Donald Trump and current minority leader Senator Mitch McConnell.
And so, Chris, this definitely means that, if I'm correct, Trump will have the opportunity to run again for president. Is that right?
Absolutely, he absolutely retains his right, excuse me, to run for any federal office, in particular president. But what this also does is it gives Trump even more power over who gets to be a House of Representative person in 2022 and 2024, really, but also who gets to be in the Senate in 2022 and 2024, and who controls the Senate. A lot of the Republican Party, some people say most of the Republican Party, is still controlled by Donald Trump. And let's not forget, 75 million people voted for Donald Trump in the presidential election. That's the most that's the most any Republican has ever got in presidential history, and that's more people than came out for him in 2016. Now Joe Biden happened to get 80 plus million people to vote for him, another record, but Donald Trump still has a lot of influence in the Republican Party. Almost, a large majority of the Republican base voters think like Donald Trump thinks, that there was fraud in this election, that the election was stolen, that the election was rigged, and that Donald Trump should still be the president. Those people are going away. Those voters are not going away. Donald Trump knows that, and Donald Trump is going to, I think, try to make something of that.
So if the supremacy fits, you must acquit. And I'll tell you what they could have been
Yep.
doing instead of this waste of time dog and pony show. They could have been making some edits to HR40. So let's talk about
Yeah.
that, where the HR40 bill came from and where we're going with it. Moy, can you
All right.
tell us a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. Senator John James Conyers Jr. is now an ancestor. Was an American politician of the Democratic Party who served as a U.S. representative from Michigan from 65 to 2017. The districts he represented always included part of Western Detroit. During his final 3 terms, his district included many of Detroit's western suburbs, as well as a large portion of the downriver area. Conyers served more than 50 years in Congress, becoming the 6th longest serving member of Congress in U.S. history. He was the longest serving African American member of Congress. Conyers was the Dean of the House of Representatives. By the end of his last term, he was the last remaining member of Congress who had served since the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson. And we'll probably stop right there, but definitely wanted to uh, give a shout out to Conyers because he's the one who actually introduced HR40. And I know, Chris, we briefly
Yeah.
had a brief conversation about this. Would you like to elaborate on
Sure.
Conyers?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in honor of Black History Month, it's probably right on time that we take this time to honor John John Conyers, the late John Conyers, who served, as was read, the longest serving African American member of Congress, the original introducer of, excuse me, what would become HR 40 over time, and the reintroducer of what will become HR 40. And by HR 40, we're talking, of course, about the Reparations Commission bill, which is going to be heard tomorrow, Wednesday, February 17th, at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. here on the West Coast. Second hearings for this important, really one of a kind bill right now in the last 2 or 3 years. And as it relates to John Conyers, when he was leaving Congress, he asked that Representative Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas actually pick up this bill and introduce it and keep introducing it. Conyers himself had introduced it every year, every 2 years since 1989. So that's 30 plus years, fam, of this same bill being introduced and really going nowhere. And it's really over the last 2 to 3 years that we've seen a lot more momentum and a lot more activity around the bill. Some of that being in the form of hearings, like we're saying, are going to happen tomorrow. The last hearings that we had for this bill was in 2019, June 19th of 2019, and there was a lot of momentum around that. And these are the second hearings once again in the last 3 or 4 years for this really important bill. It's the only reparations based legislation in Congress right now. The only for those of us Black Americans who descend from U.S. slavery. So tomorrow's a big day. This is really a big month to do this, not just because of Black History Month, but because of John Conyers and him not being here, really to see how this bill is moving forward. I'm someone who is a strong believer that HR 40 needs to be majorly overhauled and fixed, and that HR 40 is broken in its current form. But that's not to take anything away from Representative John Conyers and his work, and even getting us here to the point where there is reparations legislation already in the Congress.
Chris, I have a quick question before
Yeah.
we proceed with further HR40 stuff. Um,
Yes.
do we know why Sheila Jackson Lee was appointed to her current position in regards to HR40? Was it because of her position, or was she voted for some reason to pick up on HR40?
From what I understand, and I may not get this 100% right, so definitely folks in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, she was personally chosen by John Conyers, handpicked by John Conyers to pick up this particular bill, and that's for reasons of their working relationship, from what I understand. So, short answer, he was her choice.
And what happened in 2019? You said there was a hearing in 2019 that had a lot of
Yes.
momentum. What kind of happened? Why didn't it go on its trajectory um, through the House and
Yeah.
Senate? And
Yeah, well, there was a lot of momentum in 2019, and that momentum has continued. So the trajectory for the bill has actually been up since 2019. It's in 2019 that you had the first hearings, probably in about 10 or 15 years or so, for the bill. You also had the introduction of a Senate version of HR 40, what we call S 1083, or what was called S 1083, introduced in May of 2019 by Senator Cory Booker. You had more co-sponsors, more representatives sign on to HR 40 and endorse HR 40 with their names in the history of the bill starting in 2019. Right now, the bill has probably 162 co-sponsors. The bill ended 2020, so last year, with 173 co-sponsors. The bill started in 2019 with like 20. Okay, and the all-time high was something around, I believe, like 90 or maybe something like that. So there's been a real upward trajectory for this bill over the last 2 years. No question about it. There's more attention to it. There's more momentum to it. There's more organizing around it. More than ever.
So, I mean, but why no movement since 2019? I mean, like, for instance, there's a hearing tomorrow. Then are we not going to hear anything until 2022, or
Yeah, no,
will
great,
it?
great, great question. Yeah, no, I think so. Excuse me. Partly, I think we didn't see much more movement than we saw was because of a couple of things. One, we had a presidential election, and we were going into an election year, and that really stopped a lot of activity on a lot of things that the Democratic Party didn't really find as a super high priority. I think COVID-19 had a part to play in it. Also, the fact that our attention was on this historic COVID-19 pandemic. I think also there was still not enough legislative support to move the bill any further than it would have in 2019 or 2020. And I also think it was not a priority of the leadership of the House of Representatives, specifically in 2019 and 2020. Add that again to the fact that we were coming into a presidential year, sort of a perfect storm of things and reasons to not move this bill forward, even though the bill had more support than it ever had, and again with the understanding that there was more movement than we have seen in at least a decade, maybe even more.
And Chris, just to confirm, the last hearing, was that the one with Ta-Nehisi Coates?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with Danny Glover, with Ta-Nehisi Coates. Shout out to Danny Glover, man. I ain't trying to shade or clown the brother, but that was that hearing where it was. And if you think about it, think back to that hearing, it was less a hearing about the bill, actually, like what's inside the bill, and more about, do you support reparations versus do you not support reparations. And my my hope, my my hope for tomorrow's hearings is that we hear more about the actual bill itself. I think we're gonna show the speakers list. I don't have the utmost confidence based on the speakers list that we will hear about the bill specifically. I think there's a concerted effort, and I think in some ways even almost a fear among some of our legislators who are around this bill to do or say anything critical of the bill at all, because that might, in their thinking, probably have a negative impact on the bill's chance of going forward. So even if it's constructive criticism, which the Fix HR40 campaign, which I know we'll talk about in a few minutes, and that I'm pretty closely involved in, we think we have very constructive, very reasonable criticisms of the legislation that actually strengthen the legislation and make it better. But I think there's a fear in some ways of even bringing up what would be constructive criticisms because of how fragile this subject is, and this concept of actually finally doing what we need to do as a country to get right in a lot of ways, and that's what reparations is really about. So yeah.
So was Danny Glover invited to testify, or was he just there
Not
as
this
a?
time.
I
Not this
mean,
time.
the last time, the
Last
last
time he
time.
was. Yes, last
Okay.
time he was. Yes.
So
Yes.
let's see who's going to be invited to testify this time around.
Yeah.
What?
All right.
Weber got there, huh?
Are you familiar with these people, Chris? Do you want to go ahead and run
Yeah,
through the
I
list?
want to point out some of them for sure. You were just saying what I was going to say. The Honorable Dr. Shirley Weber, right here from California, PhD. Okay, I didn't know you could get two. You know, two of those. She got PhDs. She got a PhD. But so Dr. Shirley Weber here in California, former Assemblywoman from San Diego, author of California's State Reparations Task Force Bill AB 3121, which we had a lot to do with here in California, and still have a lot of work that we have to do on here in California. But Dr. Shirley Weber will be testifying. Not only Dr. Shirley Weber, and she will have probably she will have a very unique perspective because the California State Bill is the California State Reparations Task Force Bill is the only the largest, let's say, bill of its kind that deals with a task force for reparations. So she's going to have a really unique perspective. I'm looking forward to her testimony. I'll be watching it closely. Who else stands out? Obviously, Mr. Cam Howard of NCOBRA stands out. NCOBRA, which is the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Mr. Howard is the national co-chair. That organization has a long history with HR40. It is one of, I believe, the organizations that helped to birth the original version of HR40 way back in I'm saying way back here, I'm dating myself, right? You know, way back in the 80s. And the and Cobra has since exercised and still has a lot of influence over what's in HR40 right now. So his name obviously stands out. Mr. Hillary O. Shelton of the NAACP also stands out. And here's the name that's been getting a lot of attention online. Mr. Herschel Walker. Okay, former professional athlete. You know, if you are a sports fan, you know who Herschel Walker is, and he is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, very anti-reparations. Okay, so this is going to be very interesting to tomorrow to see. You can almost always forecast the anti-reparations, sort of arguments, but that's what I'm expecting from Mr. Walker. So those are some of the people that stand out.
So you think he's gonna do like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps?
Oh, I can almost guarantee you we're gonna hear black folks don't need money. We need I don't know, inspiration, or we just gotta think it to see it and think it to make it happen, or if we try harder, if we go to school more, if we try harder, right, if we stop having babies without fathers, right, if we get married more, all of these things that don't have anything to do with the debt that's owed to us as a people, and also don't really change the material condition of black folks in comparison to non-black folks, right? So, yeah, we're gonna hear a lot of that, especially from Mr. Walker, and again, that's BS, right? But it's also not a part of. It's also not. It also has nothing to do with the actual bill. The bill, and let's just make it plain. The bill creates a commission to study and develop reparations proposals. The bill does not have in it a reparations proposal. So whether you are for or against reparations is kind of not what we're asking about here as it relates to HR40, because HR40, all it does is create a commission to study and develop those proposals.
And who picks these witnesses? Do you know the makeup, who, how
Well,
they get
tomorrow.
picked? And yeah, how they get picked?
Yeah, so they're chosen by the bill's author and also the committee, along with some input from the people who run the actual committee. So Representative Sheila Jackson Lee had a hand in selecting who is there for the actual hearing. The organizations that lobby on behalf of the current version of HR40 also had a hand in suggesting who should be in these hearings, as well as folks in and on the actual committee that's going to do the hearing. So it's mostly a combination of Jackson Lee, her staff, also the organizations that are fighting for this bill to pass in its current form.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the edits that I'm sure everybody wants to know about, where we're at on that.
Yeah.
Experts only.
Yeah.
1776 to present window claim.
Yep.
No pay for commissioners or their organizations.
Right.
Effective racial wealth gap redress solution.
Yes. Yes.
Eligibility criteria. 18-month
Yep.
deadline. So if you just give a brief description of each of these essential
Sure.
edits.
Absolutely. And I want to start with the and there are recommendations to add to this too. This is by no means a full and exhaustive list. So I'll touch on these and then maybe even sprinkle of one or two on for good measure. So let's start with actually let's start with the eligibility criteria edit, because it's one of the most important, right? So right now in the current version of the bill, the bill does not target those of us Black Americans who descend from U.S. slavery and Jim Crow and ongoing exclusion as the folks who this bill is targeted to, right? Who these recommendations and proposals should be developed for, right? So right now that's not explicit. That's not said out loud in the actual text of the bill, and that's something that needs to be added or edited in or changed about the bill. We need to be very clear about who we're targeting for this bill, for this study, for these recommendations and proposals to be developed. Some people say, well, why don't you leave that to the actual commission or the task force, when they are actually doing their job after the bill gets passed? Well, a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to take that chance and leave that part to chance, right? That the eligibility and the target goes to folks who are not folks who are the descendants of the people who actually built this country. You don't want to leave that to chance first. Second, that's not how it worked in the case of the Japanese reparations, which are one of the most recent cases of reparations. So it's not how we've done it in history, and it's also something that you don't want to leave to chance. Let's take another one of the recommendations here that's super important. The racial wealth gap redress part of the edits. One of the edits that we're asking for is that inside of this bill right now, there be language that makes a commitment for any proposals that comes from this commission to, at bare minimum, have to address and close the racial wealth gap. And why do we care about the racial wealth gap? Why is this important? Well, it's super important because right now the racial wealth gap is probably one of our best indicators in terms of what is the effect today of things that happened yesterday and in the past. And we think that at a bare minimum, and I want to restate this and reiterate this, that at a bare minimum, the cost of any reparations plan and proposal should be what it costs to close the racial wealth gap. So we're talking between 12 and 15 trillion dollars right now, from what I can estimate from what I've read. So that's the minimum. That's where you start. That's not where you end the claim. That's not where we are done. But that's your starting number. You can go no lower than that, but you can't also do that and not do anything else. Here's another super important edit that we are fighting for that you don't see on this list right now. But direct payments. The language of the bill right now does not make a commitment to any proposals that are inclusive of or have in it direct payments as a part of any overall reparations plan. First of all, in history, reparations usually comes with some sort of direct payments to those people who are eligible. It's not the entire thing, right? But it's definitely a big part of it. Freedom of choice, freedom for free will, freedom to choose to do what you want to do with your reparations is a big part of our claim for reparation and for why this bill needs to be changed. Right now, the people who are most in charge of this bill don't believe that direct payments should be a required part of any reparations plan. They have a different view of how reparations should be distributed. They have an idea to create a financial intermediary that would manage all of the resources, or at least most of the resources of reparations. We are of the belief that reparations would be best used if you and I had the choice of what we wanted to do with the money. Here's another quick edit that we want to get in there. The fact that the bill right now starts to claim at 1619 rather than 1776 is a problem. The U.S. government was birthed, for lack of a better way to put it, in 1776. There was no U.S. government before 1776. There were colonial governments here on this continent, and there were colonies, right? But before 1776, there was no U.S. government. So right now we have to change that part of the bill that starts to claim from 1619 to 1776. Doesn't mean that we can't go after folks who had our ancestors enslaved between 1619 and 1776. I think we should and will, but that's a different fight right now. Here's one that's not on here that I do want to mention also. That right now there's no guarantee that Congress at least even consider the recommendations that any task force would actually do. So the task force and the commission could really do a great job and come up with the perfect proposals, get the eligibility right, all that great stuff. And because there's nothing in the bill right now that says Congress has to actually do anything with that proposal. Right now, what you could have is a really great proposal and no action by Congress. If you think back to the Japanese case, they had a two-step process. They had a commission bill, right? The Commission of Wartime Internment of Civilians, right? And then they had the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which was a second bill that actually did what the commission bill said it should do. So they had to have a commission bill and then a do what the commission said bill. Okay? But there was no guarantee that you go from one to the other. You could have had a commission bill and then a nothing, right? We have a similar problem here where we don't have any guarantee that the actual report and proposals actually get done. So adding some language in there that at least requires Congress to consider the proposals would be super helpful. There's some other changes too, right? Last one I'll mention is sort of a dual problem where right now there's no final deadline for a final report in the bill. There is a 1 year or 18-month sort of look, and a deadline to report, but not to have a final report. If you couple that with the fact that right now the commissioners are scheduled to get paid like very well, if you add those two things together, no deadline plus big bucks, what you end up with is a incentive to continue to get paid but not produce any reparations report. So that's another big one. Last one I'll mention because I'm on a roll here. Last one is so experts only, right? So one experts only actually on the actual commission itself. But not only that, the commissioners should be completely chosen by Congress. Right now, the president, I believe, has, in the way that the bill's set up right now, has, I believe, three picks, two or three picks on the actual commission. That wasn't the case in the Japanese case. If I'm not mistaken, it was all chosen by Congress, and so same thing should happen here. The president has the power by himself, him or herself, to create their own commission. So there's really a question as to why the president has any picks in any Congress or congressional commission. I have an idea of why that is, and primarily that's to increase the odds that the bill would actually get passed and signed. But I think a good starting position is that no picks to the president, all picks go through Congress.
So experts only. So we're not going to have to worry about Herschel Walker being on the actual
No,
commission.
no, that's the no Herschel Walker. Oh, and one thing to talk about, and so right now it also says that the commissioners should be, at least some of them should be from what they call organizations that historically advocate for reparations, et cetera, et cetera. That is code language, in my estimation and the estimation of many others, to be a way for the legacy organizations, the organizations like NCOBRA, like NARC, National African American Reparations Coalition, to get themselves on the commission. Now, I'm not saying those organizations, because of their work, don't have a right to fight for a spot on the commission and shouldn't have a seat on the commission if they feel like they've earned it. But I don't. But one of the things that language does is it sounds like it's closing the door to younger, newer reparations fighters, advocates, scholars who maybe not be connected to one of those legacy organizations. So that language could use some upgrading too.
So get the same old people on the commission who haven't moved the needle in 30 years, basically.
Possibly, and you know, I'm someone who always tries to have deference to the folks that came before me, and know what shoulders I'm standing on. But I also know that us younger, newer reparations advocates have a fresh new perspective and have a lot to say about what reparations should look like, and would be the generation, right, that would see the reparations, right? So I think we should have a voice.
Absolutely.
And just to, I know we're around the hour, but we also got other organizations like the American Slaves Inc. That was originally founded by Nora Shelton. I think they also go by DOAS, if I'm correct. So, there's a lot of organizations and people who, probably should have their hats thrown in theirs, or their names thrown into the hat as well on that board, just in my opinion. So hopefully, there'll be a lot of people trying to that have been fighting for reparations for 20, 30 years, in addition to the Incovers and Narcs, to put their name in there.
Yeah, and in addition to the younger, newer folks coming up, right? And there's, there are one thing that's going to be clear, I think, over, or at least become clear over the next, year or two, maybe, is that what you're going to see, I think, is reparations become more popular, more widely accepted, so more popular, right? uh, and and I think the fight to the fight for reparation is going to get a lot more serious and a lot more intense for sure over the next year or two. And that's a good thing for us who, those of us who are reparations advocates. This is going to be, I think the fight of our lives, and it's going to be worth every single moment of it, and every single, ounce of effort that we put in is going to be, every single minute, second that we put in is going to be key to actually winning the reparations fight, which I think we will absolutely win.
Okay. And it looks like we are drumming up some support from other advocacy agencies, like the ACLU came out with a statement here. Reparations HR40 and the path forward. During slavery, Black people were forced to labor for the enrichment of America after slavery. The emancipated suffered violent repression and exploitation under Jim Crow laws and Black codes in the South, and de facto segregation across the nation. We know that it just goes on and on. So it's helpful to have support from other advocacy agencies. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, it's important to have organizational, institutional support. I would note that the ACLU's position, and by the way, I believe the ACLU, at least in 2020, was one of three registered lobbyists on behalf of the current version of HR40. So they've actually, been on Capitol Hill, have taken a position, or actively, or at least as of 2020, they were actively lobbying on behalf of HR40. By lobby, I mean trying to get Congress to pass the current version of HR40 back in 2020 during the 116th Congress. We're in the 117th Congress now. And it's important to note that while it is important to have this kind of institutional organizational support for a bill like HR40, the current version is flawed and broken. And the position of the ACLU is to pass the current version of HR40. So I look forward to it, and I know my colleagues at the Fix HR40 campaign look forward to conversations that we will be having with the ACLU to help us come to a better understanding about what kind of language HR40 should have.
Okay, so what are the possible scenarios, outcomes after the hearing tomorrow? What can we expect either way?
More hearings. You can expect more hearings. You can expect what's called a markup, probably at some point. We're not sure when. You could expect more hearings. By markup, what we are meaning is a chance to look at the language of the bill and see if there are ways to make it better. So that's going to be particularly important for folks like myself who have been really working pretty hard to make sure that the language gets better. So we can expect at least one chance sooner or later to do that. We can expect more hearings and possibly some votes on the current language of the bill. This is between tomorrow and, let's say, the end of the year. ultimately, what I think we can expect, I'm not sure if I had to put a percentage chance on it, 50%, 40%. I'm not sure what I would put it. Maybe around 50%, but I think it's reasonable at least to expect that there will be an attempt by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee to bring the bill to a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives here in the year of 2021. It's probably best to do that this year, or at least try to do that this year in the first year of a Biden administration, as opposed to a second year of a Biden administration when we're going into the midterms and when the when control of the House of Representatives is going to be up and going to be in play. It's more risky to bring something like this up next year. So I think they're probably going to, by they I mean Jackson Lee, Representative Jackson Lee and her team are probably going to try to push this through to a floor vote sometime this year. So that's what we can expect between, let's say, tomorrow and sometime this, the end of 2021.
All right. So hopefully it'll be another whirlwind like AB 3121 and just bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, and
Get
we'll
it into
see.
law. Okay. All right. Anything else, Yamoya, that you would like to say?
Nope.
I got so fixhr40.com.
Oh, Chris, I know that the link to watch has been floating around. Do you have that handy anywhere where
Yeah,
you could drop it in the chat, maybe, so
see if I
people
can drop it
can?
in the chat while I'm here. It is at the wow. I just had it too. If I can't drop it in the chat, I will drop it in the comments. I think I have it right here. And if you go to, so I believe it's going to be streamed on YouTube at the House Judiciary's site. Let me see. Hope I don't mess some stuff up here. But the House Judiciary site, I believe, is going to be live streaming. I'm putting something in the chat right now. So if you go to House Judiciary on YouTube, you should be able to see it. If you go to House Judiciary just online, so housejudiciary.gov, you should be able to see it also. And yeah, that's where I think it'll be streaming live tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time, so 7 a.m. for us here on the West Coast. I was going to say, please support the Fix HR40 campaign. It's an awesome campaign. It's the only campaign for better reparations legislation out there right now. It's the only nationally organized campaign to get a better reparations commission. We really can't afford a broken reparations commission, and we really have to get reparations right the first time. So you can visit fixhr40.org, fixhr40.com. We have FixHR40 on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook as well. Please support the petition we have out right now. We've got almost 1,000 signatures on the petition. So please support the petition, sign it, share it. We've got another call to action out right now where you can call members of the Judiciary Committee and ask them to invite experts to testify tomorrow or at the next HR40 hearings, which we expect sometime sooner rather than later also.
All right. So HR40. So we better get out of here, get some sleep, get some rest, so we can get up tomorrow, 7 a.m. and be ready for this Twitter storm.
Yeah, I can't sleep.
All right. Well, best of luck, y'all. I'll be watching.
Same.
Peace.
All right, fam.
Justice! Now! Racial injustice is still the black man's burden and the white man's shame. Justice! Now! So wherever we live in America, we have to face the fact